Revenge with Karen. I knew something unholy was about to erupt the second his whiskey glass shattered at my feet. We were at the firm's annual gala, the kind of overpriced ego circus, where the shrimp is dry, the champagne is flat, and the men confuse cufflinks for character. I wore a navy sheath dress from Marshall's, same one as last year, because unlike some people, I didn't need sequins or self-delusion to feel like I belonged. It spent 7 years turning our firm's red-headed stepchild of project into the company's most profitable division. Quietly, strategically, no drama, just wins. Then Brad, our CEO's son, heir to the kingdom of mediocrity, stumbled up to the mic. Collar popped, cheeks flushed, and a half glass of Glenlivet in hand like he was accepting a Nobel Peace Prize for inventing the stapler. He started rambling about innovative pivots and market superiority, code for whatever buzzword he'd just inhaled off LinkedIn that week. Then he said we doubled client conversions under his guidance. Guidance. I nearly choked on my dry mini crab cake, so I smiled, leaned toward the mic, and gently corrected the number. Actually, the bump came from last quarter's multi-channel rollout, but I'm glad you brought it up. The room chuckled, politely. Not mockery, just relief someone had added an ounce of clarity to his boozy TD wannabe. Brad's smile died on the spot. And look, I get it. No man likes being fact-checked by the woman he forgot ran the damn show. But I figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't. An hour later, I'm standing near the bar, sipping flat Prosecco and trying not to fall asleep while some partner drones about golf. Brad barrels into me from behind like a frat ghost, sloshes half his drink straight onto my shoes. And then he stares at the puddle, looks me dead in the eye, and says, "Drink it from the floor, Janet." I swear to God, the room hiccuped, someone snorted, a low chuckle rippled, then silence. I looked down at my soaked heel, then up at his smug little face. My heart pounded so loud I couldn't hear the music anymore. I just smiled. That same tight-lipped, dyed smile I use when I'm 3 seconds from vaporizing someone's career. I didn't drink a damn thing. I just walked away. Now, before I go any further, if you're hearing this and thinking, "Damn, Janet, this is juicy, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like." Seriously, it costs you nothing, but it keeps stories like this coming and lets the team know you're in for the full ride. Most folks never hit that little red button, but it makes a world of difference. All right, back to the disaster in progress. By the next morning, my humiliation had already congealed into gossip. I was getting side eyes in the hallway like I'd done something wrong. And I should have known, of course I should have known, that Brad wasn't finished playing executive. Monday, 8:52 a.m. I walked into work, badge still working, coffee in hand. First email in my inbox, HR appointment, 9 o'clock a.m. No subject, no reason, just that hollow dread that slides up your throat when corporate decides to go full Game of Thrones. I walked in, sat down, and the HR rep didn't even make eye contact. Due to behavioral concerns and misalignment with executive leadership, today will be your final day. I blinked. I'm sorry, what behavior? Brad was in the corner, pretending to look at a chart on the wall like he hadn't orchestrated the whole thing. HR rep cleared her throat like she was choking on her own bullshit. This decision is final. Please return all company property by end of day. No exit interview, no explanation, just a generic printout with a signature line. I stood, walked out, and smiled at Brad as I passed him. "You're gonna wish you spilled that drink on yourself," I said. He didn't respond, just smirked, like he'd already won. But what Brad didn't know, what none of those smug, silk-tied seat fillers knew, is that I never leave a room empty-handed. Before I packed up my desk, I opened my personal email, attached one very specific document from my work drive, and sent it to myself. A little clause I'd authored during our last funding round. Just a boring legal line buried in the acquisition term sheet, filed under key person continuity. My name was on it. The kind of clause that means, if Janet Halsey's removed, entire $180 million deal could implode like a dying star. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cause a scene. I just walked out with my dignity in one hand and the company's future in the other. Funny thing about mops and messes, Brad, sometimes the woman you tell to drink from the floor is the only one keeping the roof from caving in. The walls in HR were the color of spoiled oatmeal, bland, mushy, designed to make you forget you ever had ambition. I sat in the stiff faux-leather chair, hands folded neatly in my lap, and listened to the wet paper voice of Caroline from HR read a script she probably hadn't even bothered to skim before printing. Effective immediately, due to a pattern of insubordination and incompatibility with executive leadership, your employment with Hanover Strategic is terminated. Pattern? Insubordination. The hell was this? Had libs for corporate cowardice. I glanced to my right. Brad was there, leaning in the doorway with that same smug smirk he probably practiced in the mirror every morning. The HR woman, Caroline, I think, kept her eyes on the paper like it might catch fire if she made eye contact with me. And the CEO, nowhere, not a single text, no handshake, no apology. He'd let his son do the dirty work. Again. So, no severance meeting, no exit interview, I asked, calm as a corpse. Caroline coughed. No, you'll be paid out through the end of the pay period, and any personal effects must be removed today. Brad actually whistled. Low and tuneless, like this was some weird party trick he was proud of. I stood up, nodded once, and said nothing. Because what's the point of screaming in a room full of people who have already convinced themselves you're disposable? I walked back to my office in silence. No one made eye contact. No one asked questions. Gossip moves faster than facts in places like this, and by now I was already the villain in someone else's Slack thread. My name was being muttered next to phrases like bad fit and couldn't evolve. They probably added a dinosaur emoji next to it. When I opened my laptop, I didn't waste a second. Straight to the shared legal folder. Buried under Acquisition 2024 Phase 2 Draft Final V7, there it was. Continuity Clause Key Personnel. Internal only, I clicked it open. Scanned for the line, I remembered writing myself back in Q4 when the investors were still nervous about post-acquisition talent gaps. Any change in designated key personnel, including removal, resignation, or reassignment of JL. Halsey, Chief Strategy Officer, shall require written approval by both the acquiring entity and primary investor, or deal guarantees become null and void. It wasn't a vanity clause, it was leverage. I'd insisted on it after 2 other firms torpedoed integrations by axing their strategic leads too early. I'd argued it protected the investment. Turns out it protected me. I attached the file to a blank email subject line, FYI, and sent it to my personal address. Then deleted the sent item, emptied the trash, and shut the lid, just like that. No grand speech, no tearful farewell. Just quiet, surgical survival. Packing my desk felt like reverse archaeology. I unearthed 7 years of my life in layers, coffee-stained notepads filled with rollout calendars, a drawer full of USPs I never labeled, and a broken mug that said world's okayest strategist from a long-forgotten team offsite. I threw none of it away. Every scrap felt sacred now. I didn't cry. I didn't blink. But somewhere in my chest, something detached. Like a joint popping out of place. There was a hollow space where loyalty used to be. I walked out holding my laptop, a potted plant, and a tote bag with a half-eaten Kind bar and the last printed copy of our Series D investor update, because I'd annotated the margins and I'm petty like that. As I passed the executive wing, Brad looked up from his phone long enough to toss me a wink. Don't worry, Janet, we'll keep the lights on without ya. I stopped, turned slightly. Make sure to change the bulbs. Wouldn't want you mistaking panic for innovation. He laughed like he thought I was kidding. I wasn't. Outside, the fall wind cut sharp against my arms. I sat in my car for 5 minutes without turning the key, just breathing, letting the numbness bloom into something colder, sharper. Then my phone buzzed, an alert from my personal email. Your file has been received. Just 3 words, but they hit like a gun cocking. I wasn't powerless, not anymore, because buried under the fake smiles, overpriced gala centerpieces, and Brad's whiskey-soaked tantrum was a signature, my signature that said, in very clear legal language, this house of cards didn't stand without me. And now, I had nothing left to lose. 2 days after I got canned, I was already a ghost. Not the spooky, chain-rattling kind. The corporate kind. The kind where your name gets wiped off Slack, your inbox bounces. Nobody can admit they ever sat next to you in meetings. 1 minute you're the architect of the company's highest-performing unit. The next you're a bad vibe wrapped in silence. But gossip doesn't get fired. It bloomed like black mold in a leaky basement. I started getting texts from old coworkers. The kind that feel like they're typing with oven mitts on. Hey, just heard. That can't be real. Did something happen at the gala? Brad says you quit. You had a meltdown? Brad. Of course it was Brad. Telling people I was out of sync with the new direction, that the old guard had to go, that I was burnt out. He actually said that. Me, burnt out. From carrying his dead weight up the hill for 7 years. One of the project analysts called and sounded like she was whispering from inside a closet. "I thought you were on vacation, Janet." They said you weren't aligned with the leadership's values anymore." "What values?" asked. "Excel illiteracy and spill-proof whiskey tumblers." She didn't laugh, just got real quiet and said, "I'm sorry, we're all scared." That hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't scared, not anymore, but I was unsure. There's a difference. Uncertainty rots slower. I didn't know if I was being paranoid. I didn't know if the clause still held weight. Legalese shifts like sand under pressure. Was it ironclad or ceremonial? Did the investor even remember it existed? That's when I got a text from Marcos. He was a compliance officer. Quiet, spreadsheet-obsessed, wore ties that looked like magic eye puzzles. We'd worked together during the audit hell that was 2022. He always respected the rules, which made what he said next a goddamn red flag parade. "Just FYI, I got asked to redact all continuity language from the investor term archives." Flagged it and said no. "Not sure who ordered it. Be careful." That was the final shove. I made an appointment with my lawyer, Tom, middle-aged, perpetually underslept, looked like a golden retriever in a suit that had lost its will to live. But he knew how to read contracts like they were crime scenes. When I slid the printed clause across his desk, he didn't even blink. "Oh yeah," he said, tracing it with his finger. "You authored this?" I nodded. He grunted. "Smart move." And they signed it, all parties, leaned back in his squeaky chair. "Then you're a grenade," and they just pulled the pin. I raised an eyebrow. "If they fire a key person listed in an active deal's continuity clause," he said, "the deal either halts until that person is reinstated or the clause is renegotiated." "But here's the kicker, you inserted this. You define the risk. That means they can't lawyer their way around intent. You are the clause." I sat back. The weight of it didn't hit all at once. It came in stages, like waking up after surgery. "So what's my move?" I asked. Tom shrugged. "Depends. You want back in, you want leverage, or you just want revenge?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to walk away. Let them rot. Let Brad stumble into some buzzword dumpster fire while the investor pulled out and the whole operation folded like a Dollar Tree lawn chair. I could find something new. Start over. Rewrite the story somewhere else. But another part that got me through 80-hour weeks and 3 product overhauls, and that whole 6-month stretch where we didn't know if payroll would clear, that part wanted something else. Not a seat at the table. I wanted the table itself, bolted down, with my nameplate carved into the grain. I left Tom's office with a thumb drive, a game plan, and an old ache in my spine I hadn't felt since the Series B days. The ache of holding too much power and pretending it's light. At night, I sat in bed rereading the clause. I knew every word. I'd written it half asleep 2 years ago during a Red Bull-fueled document sprint while the CEO was off golfing, and Brad was still deciding between visionary and disruptor for his LinkedIn headline. I stared at my name. Right there on page 42. JL, Halsey Chief Strategy Officer Continuity Required. They thought they could erase me. I was the ink. But even then, I wasn't sure. My thumb hovered over the forward button on the email draft to the lead investor. I could still walk away. Let it all go. Instead, I closed the laptop and whispered to the dark. They wanted a clean slate? Let's see how dirty it gets first. The email took 17 seconds to write. I timed it. Subject, Clause 12B, Key Person Continuity Body. Per our prior agreement dated June 14, 2023, see attached for relevant continuity language related to current personnel status. No further comment at this time. Attachment, the PDF, signed and watermarked with my initials glowing in the corner like a middle finger dipped in ink. I didn't CC anyone, no flair, no dramatic preamble, just the kind of quiet, lethal email that lands in an investor's inbox like a court summons wearing heels. And then I hit send. What followed was nothing. No reply, not even a bounce. Just the haunting little notification from Gmail. Your email was read at 9:16 p.m. Read, not responded to, which meant the fire was lit, but I wasn't going to get to see who burned first. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of wine, cheap, boxed, and colder than my heart. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't refreshing. I knew better than to chase the ripples once the stones already hit the lake. But God, silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you wonder if maybe you were just a replaceable cog in a machine built by smug men in loafers who couldn't code, strategize, or spell synergy without autocorrect. I slept 4 hours that night, dreamt of spilled whiskey and red Sharpie pens circling my name on a giant whiteboard that just said risk across the top. I woke up sweating, laughing, weirdly. The next morning, I made eggs, took a walk, watered my one surviving plant. I didn't check my email. I didn't need to, because around 9:42 a.m., the universe delivered its first little reward, a screenshot, texted by a friend still trapped behind enemy lines. Brad in Slack. New leadership energy is exactly what we needed. Looking forward to an exciting chapter at Hanover. We move forward, not back. Flexed fire #fresh start #fresh start. Man actually used hashtags in a company-wide message. Like firing me was a rebrand. I stared at it for a while, not angry, just fascinated, like watching a raccoon try to hotwire a car. There was something almost poetic about it. This was Brad's victory lap, barefoot, blindfolded, and whistling into traffic. I put my phone down, opened my laptop. Still no reply from the investor. But just before noon, it came. The thunderclap, 11:47 a.m. sharp. An all-staff email, high priority. No subject line fluff. Just 5 words in bold, emergency leadership meeting. Mandatory, boardroom now, no agenda, no reasoning. Just urgency capitalized. I imagined the office shifting like a beehive smacked with a broom. Phones buzzing. Middle managers sweating through their thrifted blazers. Brad's smirk dissolving like cotton candy in a puddle. They hadn't called it a town hall or strategy sync. No HR-approved euphemisms. This was a scramble, a panic disguised in Times New Roman. I didn't reply. I wasn't on the payroll anymore. Instead, I opened a blank note and wrote a title at the top, The Price of Arrogance. Then I scrolled social media, made another coffee, and sat by the window like a woman watching her old house catch fire, while knowing damn well the insurance policy was in her name. I didn't need to show up. Already had. The boardroom reeked of panic, cologne, and too many opinions in too tight a space. The lead investor, Charles Emmerich, a man with the facial expression of someone who's been tolerating incompetence since the Reagan era, stood at the head of the table. He wasn't yelling. That would have been a mercy. He was doing something far worse, reading aloud. In his hands was the investor term sheet. Not a printout, not a summary. The real thing with the embossed footer, watermarked signatures, and the yellow post-it I'd attached back in 2023 that simply read, "Don't forget Clause 12B. He lifted the paper like it weighed 100 pounds and spoke with a flat, deliberate tone that made people lean in whether they wanted to or not. Clause 12B, he said, lists a key person whose removal, resignation, or reassignment immediately voids all deal guarantees, including contingent equity dispersals and transitional leadership protections." He paused, not for dramatic effect, but because he was tired of being surrounded by adults who couldn't read contracts they signed. CEO Lambert, gray hair, thinning resolve, cleared his throat and gave a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Charles, I think we can agree that clause was more of a precaution than a—" Charles didn't look up from the paper. "Who is Janet L. Halsey?" Room tightened like a noose. HR Director Marissa blinked like someone had just spoken in a dead language. She flipped frantically through her notes, probably hoping the answer would leap off the page and wrestle her dignity back into place. The coup, Eric, slick, wide tie, useless, attempted a pivot worthy of Olympic gold. Janet, formerly CSO, yes. But the structure shifted post-gala, and we believed continuity wasn't. Charles finally looked up. "Believed?" Eric faltered. "You don't get to believe in this room," Charles said. "You get to prove. Now tell me who greenlit her termination, and why her name was never flagged during the deal due diligence." Brad, seated near the end like a third-string quarterback in a stadium of fire, didn't speak. His neck was flushed crimson, his hands buried under the table. Sweat had turned his carefully gelled hair into a sad, drooping question mark. Lambert tried to recover. Was let go due to a behavioral concern. Charles raised an eyebrow. Did the concern involve competence? No, Lambert admitted. Did it involve breach of contract? No. Did you consult legal before terminating a named key person? Silence. Charles dropped the term sheet onto the table with a slap that echoed. "You signed this. All of you." Janet L. Halsey was listed by name as a structural pillar for continuity. Her signature and yours are on that clause, and you fired her because your son didn't like being corrected in public. Now all eyes snapped to Brad. He looked like he might vomit into his cold brew. Charles stepped away from the table and paced slowly, like a judge about to pronounce sentence. "I've got the buyer's legal team asking me what the hell we're anchoring this acquisition to if the strategist who built the backbone of the division is now gone. Got 3 clauses this morning that no longer apply unless she's reinstated, rehired, or signs a waiver of continuity risk. Lambert sputtered. Surely we can explain. No, Charles cut him off. You don't explain away a clause. You don't PR spin a voided guarantee. You fix it. And right now, the only person who can fix it doesn't work here anymore. Brad finally spoke. I can call her. Everyone stared. Charles just shook his head. No, won't, because I already did. In her apartment, Janet sat on the couch with her phone on Do Not Disturb, calmly eating trail mix. She'd seen the call come in. She didn't answer, because vengeance didn't need to scream. It just had to be written down in black ink, on page 42, of a document they never thought she'd read again. In that boardroom, surrounded by glass walls and collapsing egos, her name rang louder than any promotion, louder than any speech, louder than any LinkedIn update about new leadership energy. Janet L. Halsey was the problem now, and the solution. The buyer's legal counsel joined the call with the kind of voice that makes roomfuls of executives develop sudden urinary urgency. Crisp, female, East Coast, probably Yale. No small talk, no pleasantries, just war in flats. We've reviewed Clause 12B and its corresponding signatures. It is legally binding. There's no ambiguity here. Silence. She let it hang like a noose, waiting for someone to flinch. Then she added, per our deal structure, any unilateral removal of named key persons without buyer consent constitutes a breach of continuity terms. That breach nullifies transitional guarantees, accelerates clawbacks, and opens the door to renegotiation or withdrawal. Translation: you've stepped on a live mine and it's chirping. Lambert, the CEO, coughed like he was trying to dislodge a shame nugget from his trachea. I believe there's been a miscommunication. Janet's removal was not a reflection of her value. It was an internal personnel matter, handled under extenuating circumstances. Charles, the investor, didn't even bother hiding his disgust. She was fired for not drinking whiskey off a carpet, correct? Lambert had the gall to look shocked. That was taken out of context. Brad finally tried to get ahead of the death spiral. I mean, look, I can reach out to her, he said, scratching the back of his neck like the pressure was making his brain itch. Patch things up. Explain what really happened. Charles turned so slowly it felt biblical, like a mountain about to speak. She already has counsel, he said, flat, unbothered, final. Brad's eyes widened. She what? Had counsel before the file ever hit my inbox, Charles said, which tells me she knew exactly how this would play out. Unlike you, the buyer's counsel picked it up again. At this stage, we will pause all forward progress on the acquisition until the issue is resolved. That includes escrow releases, advisory shares, and interim access rights. Should the key person decline to re-engage in an acceptable capacity, we reserve the right to fully renegotiate the offer. Eric, the coup, jumped in with the desperation of a drowning man grabbing a hunk of driftwood shaped like denial. Surely this can be fixed with a reinstatement, a written amendment. The counsel replied, only with her cooperation. Voluntary, documented, with full acknowledgement of her role in the clause and reinstatement of continuity terms. Lambert leaned forward, voice brittle. She might not want to come back. Charles chuckled. It was the sound of someone who has played this game far longer than any of them. She doesn't need to come back, he said. She just needs to sign. But if I were her, I'd make you crawl through glass first. Meanwhile, in a quiet kitchen lit by soft afternoon sun, I sat with my laptop closed, watching the blinking voicemail icon on my phone. There were 5. All from unknown numbers, 1 from Brad, 2 from Lambert. 1, amusingly, from Marissa in HR, trying to sound chipper as if we were still on Slack. The 5th was from a number I did recognize. Charles. I didn't listen to any of them. I didn't need to. Their silence for years had taught me how to weaponize mine. Instead, I stirred honey into my tea and texted my lawyer 3 words, wait for offer. Because here's the thing they never understood about me. I wasn't after their chairs. I'd already built the damn table. I'd been through all their budget cuts, strategic pivots, their silent layoffs. I'd watched them pat each other on the back for solving problems I'd already prevented. I'd seen them make decisions from cocktail napkins and then act surprised when fires broke out. They thought I was background noise. But now, every move they made had to pass through me. My silence wasn't absence. It was leverage, a mirror. And what they saw in it was themselves, smaller, panicking, exposed. Let them stew. Had all the time in the world. Back in the boardroom, the desperation was starting to curdle. CEO Lambert had switched from denial to bargaining. His tie was loose, his posture collapsing inward like a folding chair. He was trying to resurrect his authority, one legal technicality at a time, grasping for straws like they were oxygen masks. "Look," he said, voice pitching into something between a whine and a plea. "We all understand the clause references Janet. That doesn't necessarily mean she has final say. These documents, some of them, are standard templates. Legal language we recycle across deals. It's boilerplate, not ownership." Charles didn't blink. He just nodded toward the general counsel, Angela, a woman who had built her entire career around saying devastating things with perfect diction and zero emotion. Angela flipped open a red-marked binder, page to the flagged section. "Read aloud in front of the whole board. Clause 12b. In the event of removal, resignation, or reassignment of any individual designated a key person, written acknowledgement of said transition must be submitted by the originally named signatory. In this case, said signatory is J.L. Halsey, then Chief Strategy Officer." She closed the binder with a click that sounded like a mousetrap snapping shut. Charles leaned forward slowly, elbows on the polished table, and looked straight at Lambert. "Unless she signs off," he said, calm as a Sunday sermon, "we don't close. No capital, no performance shares, no accelerated vesting, no goddamn bonuses, you understand me?" Lambert opened his mouth, then closed it, then turned robotically toward Brad. "What exactly did you say to her?" It wasn't a question. It was an execution order. Brad fidgeted like a teen caught with a vape pen in Sunday school. He avoided eye contact, cleared his throat, swallowed so hard it echoed. I don't know," he mumbled. "You don't know?" Lambert repeated like the phrase tasted rotten. "I was just joking," Brad muttered. "It was a stupid night. I didn't think you told her to drink spilled whiskey off the floor in front of the executive team," Angela cut in, voice flat. "Then had her fired the next morning." Brad shifted again. "It was just, I didn't make them fire her." Angela raised one brow. "No, made it politically impossible not to." Lambert looked at him like he was realizing for the first time that his own flesh and blood might be a liability dressed in Banana Republic. "You used to think she was the only person holding this place together," Lambert said, more to himself than anyone else. "She was," Charles added. "She is." Brad finally snapped, defensive and sulky. "Well, maybe if she'd just played along." "What?" Charles cut him off, voice low but ice cold. "Played along with being publicly humiliated. With being erased from the business she built so you could pretend your last name was a resume." The room went still. Nobody spoke. Angela closed her binder again, gently this time. "We need her signature. Not yours, not your father's, hers." Lambert rubbed his eyes like the shame was made of sandpaper. "She won't come back. She doesn't have to," Charles said, standing. "She just has to agree on her terms. And frankly, were her, I wouldn't even return your calls." At that moment, Brad finally grasped the size of the crater he'd stomped into the middle of his inheritance. The quiet, the leverage, the absolute control Janet now held without stepping one foot into that room. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't sent a single threatening email. She hadn't begged or pleaded or argued. She just waited. Now every eye in that room saw her not as background noise, but as the foundation. She wasn't a signature. She was the deal, and all they had left was the privilege of asking. From her kitchen, Janet refreshed her inbox once and saw what she expected. Subject, request for discussion, deal continuity resolution. She didn't open it. She just smiled, leaned back in her chair, and whispered to no one in particular, "Your move." The first formal request arrived at 8:02 a.m. sharp. Subject line, request for reinstatement and continuity clarification, urgent from Charles Emmerich himself. Direct, professional, surgical. It included phrases like critical path alignment, resolution framework, and immediate goodwill repair. At the bottom was a sentence he hadn't bothered dressing up in legalese. "We'd welcome the opportunity to speak directly, at your discretion, regarding next steps for continuity and value preservation." I read it once, closed it, and walked my dog. When I came back, my lawyer, Tom, golden retriever in a Brooks Brothers suit, had already replied for me. "Miss Halsey appreciates your outreach. She is open to discussing the terms of future cooperation. Reinstatement is not under consideration." There was no anger in the message, no heat, just stone. The kind of cold professionalism that makes billion-dollar men break out in stress rashes. Within the hour, Lambert tried his own version of an olive branch. A voicemail left at 9:17 a.m. His voice sounded like warm milk left out overnight. "Hi, Janet. I'd appreciate a chance to speak privately, just you and me, off the record, clear the air. Let's find a path forward that honors what you've built." He sounded tired, smaller, like someone forced to admit the steering wheel had been fake all along. I didn't call back. Thing about private calls is they're for people trying to rewrite history without witnesses. And I'd had enough of invisible credit and hidden apologies. Let the board squirm together. By 11:30 a.m., I was the agenda. A new emergency meeting had been called. Not about restructuring, not about market shifts, just me. My name was being whispered again, not like gossip this time, like gospel. Inside that boardroom, Charles stood at the head of the table and cut through their desperation with a scalpel. She's not coming back for her title. She doesn't need it. The power dynamic has shifted. Lambert, rubbing the bridge of his nose, asked what everyone else was too afraid to say aloud. So what will it take? Angela, legal counsel, ran a finger down a yellow legal pad. Best case scenario. Draft a consulting agreement that gives her decision-making authority over strategic operations through the transition period. No subordination, no rebranding, and we call her founder emeritus or strategic steward, something ceremonial enough for optics but heavy enough to anchor the clause. Brad, hunched at the far end of the table, muttered, "She's not going to want to talk to me." Charles didn't look at him. Correct. Then, Angela added, "If we want any shot of getting her signature before the deal implodes, we better let her name her price." It wasn't just about Janet returning. It was about her choosing to. That distinction now cost millions. Because without her sign-off, without that clause being satisfied, the acquisition, and every perk these people had been salivating over, was ash in the wind. They couldn't just ask her back. They had to make an offering. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch in a hoodie and jeans, sipping coffee and watching leaves turn over in the breeze. I wasn't worried. I wasn't pacing. My phone buzzed twice with follow-up emails. I let them sit. Because the part they still didn't grasp, the part that made this even more delicious, was that I wasn't after payback. That would have been too easy. What I wanted was proof. Proof that I'd been the bones, not the skin. The blueprint, not the decoration. The one thing they couldn't replace, couldn't spin. Gaslight out of the room. And now, they were drafting whole new roles just to give me the illusion of coming back. But they all knew I never left. I just let the air clear so they could smell the rot they'd been breathing for years. And now they'd do anything, to keep me from walking away for good. The boardroom was already mid-collapse when I opened the door. 12 men and women in tailored suits, frozen like mannequins, caught mid-prayer. Charles stood near the screen where a giant PDF of the term sheet, Clause 12B, highlighted in gold, glowed like a holy scripture nobody had believed in until it started answering prayers. Angela sat off to the side, arms crossed, a pen hovering above a legal pad like she was waiting to document the first person dumb enough to speak. I didn't knock. I didn't ask for a seat. I just walked in. The sound of my heels, low, practical, echoing with surgical clarity, was the only noise in the room. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Charles was the first to speak, not in greeting, not even to me. He turned to the room, pointed down at the clause, and said, "Who is this person this entire deal hinges on?" Silence. Lambert, the CEO, looked down at the contract like it had just become sentient and started judging him. His mouth opened once. Then again. Nothing came out but the ghost of authority. Then he looked at Brad. Brad, poor, pink-necked Brad, looked like someone had stapled his tongue to the roof of his mouth. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish trying to remember how water works. That was the moment, that right there. When the silence wasn't awkward, it was mine, so I filled it with exactly 7 words. Let's discuss revised terms. My way, no flair, no venom. No pitch-perfect monologue. A truth clean as glass. Angela clicked her pen. Lambert swallowed like he was trying to digest his spine. Brad finally reached for his water glass, but his hand was shaking, subtle but unmistakable. A tremor born from the realization that the girl he mocked in public was now deciding whether he got to keep his job, his equity, or his dignity. Charles didn't say a word. He just stepped aside and let me walk to the table. I placed a single folder down, thicker than it needed to be, dramatic enough to feel like justice. Inside was my updated agreement, marked up with everything they never offered me when I was too polite to demand it. A strategic oversight role through the merger. Decision-making power over all personnel tied to the division I built. A bonus tied not to goodwill but results, numbers I knew I'd hit. No title, no politics, just teeth. And at the bottom, single condition in bold, no direct communication with B. Lambert, unless initiated by me, permanent. I didn't wait for approval. I didn't blink. I just pushed the folder toward the middle of the table and said, "It's not about coming back. It's about moving forward without repeating history." Lambert nodded, eyes glassy. Charles picked up the contract, read the first page, and grinned like a man who'd just watched a guillotine fall in high definition. Angela turned to Brad, voice flat. "You'll want to speak with HR after this." He flinched. I turned, walked out. Same steady pace, same echoing heels. And as the door swung shut behind me, I caught one last glimpse, Brad staring down at the clause that bore my name like it was a curse written in blood. He reached for his glass again, still shaking. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.